What's your take on the whole Jeffrey Epstein saga and whether or not the list exists and what's really going on here?
I think there's a list, but it's not a list that was compiled by Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. It's more that in his two trials, from 2007 all the way up until 2018, there were names that came into the investigations. These were people who had texted him, emailed him, that had been seen with him, and so all the files that had been, I guess we'd use the word suppressed, had a lot of names on them. And I think people have said there's 170 names. But the problem was that no one really knows the status of why those names were there. There were actors like Bruce Willis, Leonardo DiCaprio, Kevin Spacey, Alan Dershowitz, the lawyer, Bill Gates, but nobody really knows whether these were people that Jeffrey Epstein was soliciting to manage their money, whether they were just socially aware of them. And so I think the Trump campaign thought this is going to be an easy thing to do. And then when they came into power and they began to prepare to release these scattered names, people called them and this is kind of conjecture, but it's out there as the most logical explanation. People started to call and say, look, Jeffrey Epstein called me, I called him back, that's why I'm on his phone records, or I met him at a fundraiser at Harvard, I discussed his project, I met with him for lunch. If you release these names, you're not going to discriminate between the people who are actually engaged in this illegal pedophilia or the people who just knew him. So I think for a moment, the administration, I think wrongly paused and said, it's ancient history. There's nothing there. He did commit suicide. And then when the base went kind of ballistic, that fed into the left-wing general, attack on Trump for everything. And, the administration got blindsided. Now I think the answer is they're just going to let all the names out and let people with Freedom of Information Act suits or on their own try to sort it out.
You can easily imagine there would have been a lot of people with powerful motives to see to it that Epstein died in his cell, perhaps even Epstein himself, who he presumably would not have wanted to have faced the publicity and the long sentence in a cell as a convicted child trafficker. What's your take on those theories around his death?
Well, there's a missing minute or so in some of the video surveillance, and the people who were in charge of surveilling seem to be incompetent or asleep at the wheel, and that's prompted these questions. I guess I know I met Don Bongino, the assistant FBI director. I know Kash Patel, and I can tell you that when they were out of power, they wanted everything released, and they have come to the conclusion after reviewing things, I think they're going to release it, that it's more likely that he was looking at the American prison system and what they do to people who are pedophiles. That is the inmate population. It's not good, and he was not going to get out of it this time. He had no more cards to play. He was looking at 20 or 30 years or the rest of his life, and he may or may not have offered some of the surveillance people money or special influence if they would allow him to put a noose around his neck. In other words, they would not intervene. So I think there was some type of complicity, but I'm not sure it was to murder him, but maybe to facilitate his suicide. But there's certainly laxity there, and it was probably by design.